you heard of the Great Chicago Fire?
Yes.
And have you heard of the Titanic?
Yes.
And have you heard of the Eastland disaster?
No.
And have you ever heard of the Eastland disaster?
I actually have not.
Okay. How do you pass this intersection frequently?
Constantly, yeah.
And have you ever heard of the Eastland disaster? Hey, I'm Andy White. I'm an ensemble member of Looking Glass. I'm also the co-creator of The Eastland, which is a new play. Have you ever heard of the Eastland disaster?
I've heard of it.
What do you know about it?
It was a boat that capsized. I don't know much about it other than that.
Here we are on the river, right between LaSalle Street and Clark, right downtown Chicago. Have you heard about the Titanic?
Yes.
Have you heard about the Eastland disaster?
No.
Okay. Do you pass this intersection a lot?
Every day.
This boat just tips over right in the middle of the river, right in the middle of the city. 844 people die. It's one of the biggest mortality events in American history, not just Chicago history, but in the country. But most people, if you ask them as they walk down the street, they've never heard of it. And so I'm interested in why. Why is it? How did that happen? At 7:30 in the morning of July 24th, 1915, the Eastland, a boat chartered by the Western Electric Company, was set to cast off. It was loaded with employees, mostly immigrants, headed out across the lake for a day at the annual company picnic. But instead the boat leaned to port, and then it just kept leaning until it just tipped over. In all, 844 people died, most in just a matter of minutes. And the rest of the day and the day after that was spent trying to rescue the bodies. We're standing exactly right where the event took place. That's the Reed Murdoch building, which was where they first brought the bodies initially, until there were so many that they had to move them. The whole city of Chicago was in mourning for weeks afterwards. There were lots of theories about why it happened and who's to blame, but I think those are probably scant comfort to the families of the victims. I guess I've always been interested in plays that have a strong social, political content. In 1989, I wrote and directed Of One Blood, a play about the 1964 murder of 3 civil rights workers in Mississippi. It was the 25th anniversary of their deaths, and I was interested in exploring what had changed about race relations in America and what hadn't. Then in 2004, I adapted and directed George Orwell's 1984. This was not long after the war in Iraq had begun, and I was just very interested in the relationship between language and power, how we can all be complicit in that distortion. And André Plus, the composer for Eastland, did the sound design for 1984. So Eastland has this great historical, social, political element, but I'm also really interested in the inner lives of these characters we explore. There's Bobby Onstad, this 14-year-old girl, trapped in the hull of a ship trying to stay afloat for 14 hours. There's Ilsa, a woman just tortured by guilt because she let go of her son's hand when the boat began to tip. She fears she's lost him forever. And there's Reggie Bowles, who's later known as the Human Frog because he jumps in the water, 17-year-old daredevil, spends the next 11 hours pulling bodies out of the water, both alive and dead. And with catastrophic events like this, whether it's the Eastland or September 11th or the recent events in Haiti, I think a lot of us want to know what's going on inside the head of the survivor who is waiting for hours on end, waiting for rescue, or going on inside the head of the rescuer who keeps going in time after time at peril of their own life. What are they thinking? And that's why a lot of the play takes place as interior mental narrative. We're all, when the humans have come and gone, as it says at the end of the piece, always the river remains. This is going to be here. And for me, anyway, that is some strange comfort.
Proper farewell, proper goodbye is what they all deserve. One last proper adieu to those who died. Good or bad doesn't matter, whether hanged